Hello, everyone, and welcome back to this episode where we are going to begin the creation of our database. We are going to look at how we create the actual database and then how to populate it with our tables. The way that we have modeled earlier in the course modeling a database is what we're going to use as a basis for how we're going to build this database. So if you've not seen that, don't worry. I'm going to show you exactly how our database looks like from a logical step, and then we're going to implement it in our physical database here. Let's first take a look at our diagram then. So this is what our database is supposed to look like once it's finished. As you can see, we got one entity over here for customer. We got one in the middle that says user, one to the right that's for employees. From users, we also have a subcategory named zip codes. And then here on the right, you have service that comes down from employee. Below service, there's a service occurrence, and below that, there are our vehicles. And to the right, we have vehicle information. And then down here, we have a sale occurrence that binds vehicles, employees, and customers together to make a sale. So basically, this is what our database is going to look like once we have implemented it fully. With that being said, let's jump back into SQL Server. So where do you start once you brought up SQL Server like this? There is a little button up here that says new query, which is where we're going to start. It's going to bring up for you this table here. It's just a white blank space for you to write in. So we're going to start by utilizing the create database command. We're going to call this one car sales, and then we execute it. So now we have a database labeled car sales, which we are going to refresh, and then we can see it in the databases section. Here we have car sales. At the moment, there are no tables except the system file external graph tables, which are empty. So we need to start populating this with tables. And just like how we created a database, we're going to continue by creating a table. So if we take a look back at our diagram from earlier, I like to start by picking the entities which do not have any foreign key dependencies and build from there. So in my example here today, we're going to be starting with the zip codes simply because it's free attributes and they're all pretty easy. Now, if you're wondering about this, this is int all the way down. Don't worry about it. It has no meaning for what we're about to do. It's just me being lazy. If I wasn't lazy, I would be doing something like we've done in the employee section over here, where we have an integer, a varchar, an integer, a datetime, and an integer. So if I wasn't lazy, it would look like this on each and every single one of our tables. But because I have a rough idea of how we're going to model this, I've chosen to just leave these in the model as all integer. But this is basically your data type that we're going to implement. And what I mean by that, I can show you straight away by the way that we're going to implement zip codes. So let's jump back to our database and let's get creating. Create table, like I said, we're going to be starting with zip codes. And when you do this, it's important to remember that first you lay down a statement such as create table, and then you pick out the name for the table, and then there has to be a parenthesis, and within these parentheses is where you're going to actually map out your table. So we're gonna start out by doing zip code, and it's gonna be an integer, and it's not we do not allow any non-values inside of it, and we're gonna say that it is a primary key as well. You can put the primary key as we do here, but you can also put it at the end of the statement if you wanted to. We can do that in the next example, and you can see both of them. Then we had town, and then this is going to be a varchar, and we do not allow any empty values here either. And then we got a county. We're going to do it like so, and no empty values here either. So this is a full script for creating our table label zip codes. So we have chosen a primary key, which is the zip code itself. We say that the zip code is going to be made up of numbers and nothing else. We say that we do not allow no values to be put into zip code, just as we do not allow any non-values to be put into a town or a county. And here we say that town is going to be made up of characters, and we allow the maximum number of characters to be 25. So if it's more than 25, we do not want it inside of our table. And the same thing goes for the county. We say that 40, maybe they have a bit more numbers that, or letters or whatever they need to put in there. So we say that, okay, you can have 40 characters for each and every one county. And then just execute it by either running this one here, or as I see F5, which is what I'm using, and it completed successfully. Now if you update car sales by hitting refresh here and going to tables, did I just, yeah, all right, I am sorry, we need to do this. This is my bad. So because we haven't chosen our database yet, we need to utilize the use car sales to tell the database that we're using the car sales database and then run it. So if we update car sales now, then we should see it on the tables, which is where it's also at. So here you can see you have a zip code, which is a primary key, an integer, and does not allow non-values, a town, which is a varchar, and non-values not allowed, county, varchar, non-values not allowed. All right, so with that done, let's look at what happens once we continue and we need to include foreign keys and primary keys in the same create table. When we look back at our drawing over here, you'll see that users is probably the most logical next step coming up from zip codes. It has one foreign key which points down to zip codes. So this is where we're going to continue. Now we are going to include all of these attributes when we create our table. And so this is going to be a little bit of a longer command, but the idea behind it is still the same. And jumping back here, now that we've actually utilized the use car sales, we can delete it if we wanted to, because this specific window now, as you can see here, says .car sales in the middle, which means that we are now connected to the car sales database. All right, so we're going to create users now. And then we're going to say that user ID is an integer. And here I use a command called identity, which basically says that for each user that we create, it's going to add 1 to the user ID. So the first person that gets inserted into the database is going to get the user ID 1. The second person is going to get user ID 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It's just going to keep going with an increase of 1 each time. Now we're not going to specify the primary key here this time, but we're going to do it at the bottom so you can see how that might look. When you use identity, it's not really necessary to put not null, since it'll always by itself automatically push a number into the user ID. All right, so moving on, we're going to do a first name like so, a last name. We're going to do a mobile phone. And this is also going to be a varchar. If you're wondering why this is a varchar and not like an integer, it might be because we might want to add a +1 in the front of the actual call. So to be able to do that, we need to put it into varchar. Otherwise, we would not be able to put it in a plus sign. And then we have a street address, which is a street number, like so. Once again, why we use varchar and not integer for street numbers is because there exist things such as 5B, 77C, whatever it might be. Now, we're taking a bit of a gamble by placing the street number as 5, which basically means that if somebody lives at 10,000 something on one street, since I live in Sweden and here the most we have is like 100 something, I'm gonna go with that. If you did live in a city or a country which had more than 5 characters, you would obviously make the varchar longer, such as 10, 15, whatever might be necessary. And since we've chosen to put the primary key at the end, all you need to do is simply write out primary key and then user ID, and that's it. And if you have a foreign key, which we do have in the form of zip code, we're gonna write like this. So zip code is a foreign key, but then we also tell the database that it references zip code and then zip code. By doing this, the database will know that when we utilize zip code, it actually points to a different table with the same name. Now, it doesn't need to be the same name here. We can have zip code and just zip codes or whatever we want within this parenthesis. But the important thing is that we declare where it's supposed to point. So by doing this, the database will know how to do its queries in the future. And when you're done with this, just execute. And now if we refresh over here, we are going to see that we have now actually 2 tables. And as you can see here on the users, you have a primary key, but you also have the white foreign key down here. So when you create a table such as this, you can create as many or as few foreign keys as you wish. It just needs to be logical inside of your model so that you don't point to stuff you don't really need to point to. We'll get a little bit further into this as we move along and get into the actual query side of things, but for just for now, know that you can populate a table, or as we call it, an entity, with as much attributes or rows as you want. You could, for instance, have the age of the user. You could, for instance, have I don't know what kind of car they drive, if they like apples, whatever it's pertinent to your database, you can actually put into a table and use it. It's all up to you to figure out what's the most useful things to store inside of your database, depending on which type of database that you're actually creating. With that said, I wish to thank you for watching today. And next time, we're going to take a little bit more of a look at how you can change tables that you've already created, how you can remove foreign keys, primary keys, how you can add foreign keys and primary keys and stuff like this. I hope to see you then, and thank you for watching.